The crack of thunder shook the walls of Quinton Xavier's cabin so hard that he thought the roof might cave in. But nothing prepared him for the desperate pounding on his door at midnight, in the middle of the worst storm New Mexico territory had seen in months. He rolled out of bed, already reaching for his gun belt out of instinct, though something about the frantic rhythm of those knocks told him this was not trouble of the violent kind. When he pulled open the heavy wooden door, rain immediately lashed against his face, but through the downpour he could make out a woman collapsed against his doorframe, soaked to the bone and shaking like a leaf in autumn wind. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "Please, I need medicine. My sister, she is burning up with fever. I tried everything, but nothing works. Please, do you have anything?" Quinton grabbed her arm to steady her as she nearly fell forward into his cabin. In the flickering light of his oil lamp, he could see she was young, maybe 20 or so, with long dark hair plastered to her face and clothes that looked like they had not been dry in hours. Her eyes were wild with desperation and exhaustion. "Come inside before you catch your death too," he said, pulling her across the threshold. "I have got some willow bark tea, but I am no doctor. Where do you live?" "About 3 miles east," she said, her teeth chattering so violently she could barely get the words out. "The old Zimmerman homestead. My sister Lily and we moved there 2 months ago after our parents passed. She has been sick for 3 days, but tonight the fever got so much worse. I did not know where else to go. I saw smoke from your chimney yesterday when I was in town." Quinton moved quickly to his small medicine cabinet, such as it was. He had some basic supplies that most ranchers kept on hand, but he knew immediately that what this woman needed was beyond his capability to provide. The homestead she mentioned was a ramshackle place that had been abandoned for years. He could not imagine what possessed 2 young women to try to make a go of it out there alone. "What is your name?" he asked as he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Laura," she said. "Laura Zimmerman." "Well, not Zimmerman really, but we took the name when we claimed the property. Our name is Zeller." "Quinton Xavier," he replied, already pulling on his boots. "And Miss Zeller, I am going to be straight with you. If your sister is as bad off as you say, willow bark is not going to cut it. You need a real doctor." Laura's face crumpled, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. "The doctor in Raton would not come. I went there first, knocked on his door for 10 minutes. He finally opened the window and said he does not make house calls in storms, especially not for people who cannot pay upfront. I have money, but it is all back at the house. I was so panicked I just ran out without thinking." Quinton felt anger flash through him. Doc Henderson was known for being particular about payment, but to refuse to help a sick girl was low even for him. However, there was another option, though it would require a hard ride in terrible conditions. "There is a doctor in Springer," he said, already moving to gather supplies. "Doc Morrison. He is a good man, does not turn people away. It is about 20 miles north from here." Laura's eyes went wide. 20 miles, in this weather, that would take hours, and my sister does not have hours. I need to get back to her now. "You go back to your sister," Quinton said, his mind already made up. "Keep her cool with wet cloths if the fever is high. Keep her drinking water if she will take it. I will ride to Springer and bring Doc Morrison back. You would do that, for people you do not even know." Quinton paused in his preparations and looked at her directly. Even bedraggled and desperate, there was something striking about her. Not just her appearance, though she was pretty enough, but the fierce determination in her eyes, the kind of strength it took for a woman to come out alone in a storm like this to save her sister. "Out here, we help each other or we all die alone," he said simply. "Now go." "I will be there as soon as I can." Laura reached out and grabbed his hand, squeezing it hard. Thank you so much. I will never forget this. Then she was gone, disappearing back into the storm. Quinton watched her for just a moment before turning to finish his preparations. He dressed quickly in his oilskin coat and hat, grabbed his saddlebags with supplies, and headed to the small barn behind his cabin where his horse Jasper waited. The big roan gelding was not happy about being saddled in the middle of the night, and even less happy when they headed out into the teeth of the storm, but Jasper was steady and sure-footed. They had been through worse together. The ride to Springer was brutal. The rain came down in sheets, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Lightning split the sky every few minutes, each crack of thunder making Jasper skitter nervously. The trail was more mud than road, and twice Quinton had to dismount and lead his horse around washouts that could have sent them both tumbling. But he kept thinking about Laura's desperate eyes, about her sister lying in that old house burning up with fever, about two young women alone in the world trying to survive. He had been alone for the 3 years since he settled his claim outside Raton, working his small ranch and mostly keeping to himself. His parents had passed from cholera back in Kansas, and he had a brother somewhere in California he had not heard from in 2 years. He understood what it meant to be on your own. The storm began to break around 4 in the morning, the rain easing to a drizzle as he finally spotted the lights of Springer in the distance. He pushed Jasper harder, knowing the horse was exhausted but needing to make time. Doc Morrison lived above his office on the main street. Quinton pounded on the door, not caring that he was waking the whole neighborhood. After a minute, a window opened above and a gray-haired man stuck his head out. "Who is making all that racket?" "Doc Morrison, my name is Quinton Xavier. I need you to come with me right now. There is a girl sick with fever, sounds like it might be serious. She is about 20 miles south, Old Zimmerman Place outside Raton." 20 miles? Son, do you know what time it is?" "I do, sir. I have been riding through hell for the last 3 hours to get here. I would not ask if it was not urgent." Something in Quinton's tone must have convinced him, because Doc Morrison's head disappeared, and a minute later he was opening the door, already dressed and carrying his medical bag. "Let me get my horse saddled. You look like death warmed over. There is coffee in the pot on my stove, still warm. Help yourself while I get ready." Quinton did not argue. He stumbled into the office and found the coffee, drinking it down even though it was bitter and thick. The warmth helped push back the chill that had settled into his bones. 10 minutes later, they were riding back south. The storm had passed, leaving the sky clear and full of stars, but the trail was still a muddy mess. Doc Morrison proved to be a capable rider despite his age, keeping pace with Quinton without complaint. "Tell me about the patient," the doctor said as they rode. Quinton relayed everything Laura had told him, which was not much. High fever for 3 days, getting worse. Doc Morrison asked questions about other symptoms, but Quinton did not have answers. "Could be any number of things," the doctor said. "Influenza, typhoid, pneumonia. Would not even rule out malaria, though that is less common up here. We will know more when I examine her." They rode hard, stopping only once to rest the horses. The sun was just starting to paint the eastern sky pink when they finally approached the Zimmerman homestead. It looked even more ramshackle in the growing light than Quinton had imagined. The roof sagged in places and several windows were boarded up. But smoke came from the chimney, and as they drew closer, the door flew open and Laura ran out. She looked worse than she had during the night. Her face was pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes. She was still in her wet clothes, and he could see she was shaking. "Thank God," she breathed. "Thank God you came back. She is worse. The fever will not break, and she has not been awake in over an hour." Doc Morrison dismounted quickly, grabbing his bag. "Take me to her." Laura led them inside. The cabin was sparse, with mismatched furniture and cracks in the walls stuffed with old newspaper. But it was clean, and someone had tried to make it homey with wildflowers in a jar on the table and curtains sewn from flour sacks. In the single bedroom, a girl lay on a narrow bed, her face flushed and sweaty. She looked younger than Laura, maybe 18 at most, with the same dark hair and fine features. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. Doc Morrison went to work immediately, examining the girl with practiced efficiency. He checked her pulse, listened to her breathing, looked at her eyes and throat. Quinton and Laura stood back, watching anxiously. "How long has she been coughing?" the doctor asked. "Since yesterday," Laura said. "Not much, but when she does, it sounds bad. Any blood?" "No." Doc Morrison nodded, continuing his examination. Finally, he stepped back. "It is pneumonia. Pretty advanced. You were right to get help when you did. Another day, and I do not know that I could have done much for her." Laura swayed on her feet, and Quinton moved without thinking, catching her elbow to steady her. She looked up at him with grateful eyes. "Can you help her?" Laura asked the doctor. "I can, but she is going to need constant care for the next few days. Medicines, steam treatments to help her breathe, keeping the fever down. I can stay today and tonight, get her started on treatment, but then I have other patients who need me. You will need to continue the care yourself." "I can do it," Laura said immediately. "Just tell me what to do." "First thing you need to do is get yourself dry and warm," Doc Morrison said firmly. "You are no good to your sister if you get sick too. Mr. Xavier, why do not you help her get a fire going and something hot to eat while I tend to the patient?" Quinton nodded, gently steering Laura out of the bedroom. She protested at first, not wanting to leave her sister's side, but he was insistent. "The doc knows what he is doing. Let him work." In the main room, Quinton built up the fire while Laura changed behind a blanket hung in the corner. When she emerged, she was in a simple brown dress, her hair still damp but at least no longer dripping. She looked exhausted. "When did you last eat?" Quinton asked. "Yesterday morning, I think." He looked around the small kitchen area and found some eggs, a bit of bacon, and some slightly stale bread. It was not much, but it would do. He cooked while Laura sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea he had made her. "I cannot believe you rode all that way," she said quietly. "In that storm, for strangers. Like I said, out here we help each other. Still, most men would not have bothered, especially not for two women on their own who have nothing to offer in return." Quinton set a plate of food in front of her. "Eat, and you do not owe me anything." They sat in silence for a while, Laura eating slowly at first and then with more appetite as she realized how hungry she was. Quinton found himself watching her, noticing things he had been too rushed to see before. The graceful way she moved despite her exhaustion, the determined set of her jaw, the way her eyes kept darting to the bedroom door, worry evident in every glance. "Tell me about your sister," he said, partly to distract her and partly because he genuinely wanted to know. Laura's expression softened. "Lily is the best person I know. After our parents died, she never complained once, even though she is only 18 and should be thinking about dances and pretty dresses, not how to keep a roof over our heads. We had nothing left after the debts were paid, so when we heard about homestead land available here, we pooled what little money we had and came west. It has been hard, but we were making it work. And then she got sick." "What about other family, friends?" "No one. Our parents were only children, and their parents are long dead. We had some friends back in Missouri, but no one who could help us, not really." She looked at him directly. "It has just been the two of us for 6 months now. We have managed." There was pride in her voice, and Quinton respected that. He knew what it cost to make it alone, and for two young women without any resources or experience, what they had accomplished was remarkable. Doc Morrison emerged from the bedroom a few hours later. The fever is starting to come down. I have given her medicine and done a steam treatment. She woke up briefly, which is a good sign. I will stay through the night to monitor her, but I think she is going to pull through. Laura burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Quinton stood awkwardly, not sure what to do, but then she looked up at him with tears streaming down her face and said, "Thank you. I do not care what you say, I owe you everything. If you had not ridden for help, she would have died. I know it." "She is not out of the woods yet," Doc Morrison cautioned. "But with proper care, she should make a full recovery. It will take time, though. A few weeks at least." Quinton looked around the cabin again, seeing it with new eyes. The cracks in the walls, the threadbare blankets, the nearly empty pantry. Two women alone, one of them sick for weeks, with winter coming on in a few months. An idea was forming in his mind, but he pushed it aside for now. There would be time for that later. "I should head back to my place," he said. "Check on my stock. But I will come back tomorrow, bring some supplies." "You have done so much already," Laura protested. "And I will do more if it is needed," he said firmly. "That is the end of it." He caught Doc Morrison's eye, and the older man gave him a knowing look. Quinton ignored it, tipping his hat to Laura and heading outside to where Jasper waited. The ride home gave him time to think. He had meant what he said about helping, but there was more to it than simple charity. Something had sparked in him when he looked into Laura's eyes, something he had not felt in a long time. Maybe ever. A connection, a pull, a sense that his life had just changed direction in a fundamental way. He told himself he was being ridiculous. He had known her for all of a few hours, most of that time spent riding through a storm. But the feeling persisted. Over the next week, Quinton found himself riding to the Zimmerman place every day. He brought food, firewood, supplies. He fixed the worst of the gaps in the walls and patched the roof in 3 places. Doc Morrison returned twice to check on Lily, pronouncing himself satisfied with her progress. Laura tried to pay him at first, pressing a few coins into his hand, but he refused. "Save your money. You are going to need it to get through winter. I cannot just let you do all this for nothing," she insisted. "Then pay me back by having supper with me," he said, the words coming out before he had really thought them through. She looked surprised, then pleased. "I think I can manage that." They fell into an easy routine. He would arrive in the afternoon, do whatever work was needed, and then stay for supper. Laura was a good cook despite limited ingredients, and they would sit at the small table and talk for hours. He learned that she was 22, that she loved to read, but had to sell most of her books to pay for the journey west, that she was terrified of spiders, but had killed a rattlesnake with a shovel the second week they were on the homestead. She learned that he was 26, that he had fought briefly in the tail end of the Indian Wars but did not like to talk about it, that his dream was to build up his ranch into something substantial. Lily recovered slowly but steadily. 2 weeks after that desperate night, she was sitting up and eating solid food. 3 weeks in, she was walking around the cabin, though she tired easily. She was a sweet girl, quieter than her sister but with a quick smile and gentle manner. "I hear you are the man who saved my life," she said to Quinton one evening. "Your sister saved your life by going out into that storm to find help. I just did the riding. Laura told me you rode 20 miles through a storm in the middle of the night for someone you had never met. That is not just doing the riding, that is being a hero." Quinton felt his face heat up. "I am no hero, just a man who did what anyone should do." But Lily just smiled knowingly, her eyes darting between him and her sister. As October turned to November, Quinton realized that he was falling in love with Laura Zeller. It was there in the way his heart lifted when he saw smoke from her chimney in the distance, in how he found excuses to brush her hand when passing plates at dinner, in the way he laid awake at night thinking about her laugh. The realization terrified him. He had always figured he would marry someday, but he had imagined it as something practical, a partnership to help build his ranch and raise children. He had not expected this feeling, like a fire in his chest that grew stronger every time he saw her. He was almost certain she felt the same way. There were moments when he caught her watching him, her expression soft and open. Times when their eyes met and held, and the air between them seemed to crackle with possibility. But neither of them said anything, and the weeks continued to pass. Winter came early that year. By mid-November, there was already snow on the ground. Quinton found himself worrying constantly about Laura and Lily in that drafty cabin. He brought them extra firewood, but he knew it would not be enough to get them through a hard winter. One night, after a particularly good supper, he found himself alone with Laura while Lily slept in the bedroom. They were sitting by the fire, and Laura was mending a dress. The firelight played across her face, and Quinton thought he had never seen anyone more beautiful. "Laura," he said, his voice rough, "I need to talk to you about something." She set down her mending and looked at him with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "What is it? This cabin is not going to make it through winter, not with you and Lily and everything you need. It is too small, too drafty. You are going to freeze or you are going to run out of food or both." Her expression closed off, pride stiffening her shoulders. "We will manage. We have made it this far." "I am not saying you could not," he said quickly. "I am saying you should not have to. Not when there is another option." What option? This was it. The moment he had been building toward for weeks without fully acknowledging it. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Marry me," he said. Laura's eyes went wide. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, more firmly this time. "My cabin is bigger, warmer. I have enough land and stock to support a family. You and Lily would be safe there. You would not have to struggle anymore. You want to marry me so Lily and I have a place to stay for the winter." Her voice was carefully neutral, but he could see hurt flickering in her eyes. "No," he said, moving to kneel in front of her chair so he could look directly into her face. "I want to marry you because I have been falling in love with you since the first night you knocked on my door. Because you are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever met. Because when I think about my future now, I cannot imagine it without you in it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring. It had been his mother's, the only thing of value he had from his old life. A simple gold band with a small garnet stone. "This was my mother's. I want you to have it. I want you to be my wife. And yes, I want Lily to be safe too because she is your sister and that makes her my family as well. But mostly, Laura, I just want you. I love you." Tears were streaming down Laura's face. "You love me, with everything I have." "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been so afraid to say it, afraid you were just being kind, that you would eventually stop coming around once Lily was well. I am never going to stop coming around. Not if you will have me." She laughed and cried at the same time, pulling him up and kissing him. It was their first kiss and it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Quinton slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes." They told Lily the next morning. She cried and hugged them both, saying she had been hoping for this for weeks. "I felt so guilty," she confessed, "knowing that the only reason you two had not said anything was because you were both so focused on taking care of me. I have been trying to get better faster just so you could move on with your lives." "You are part of our lives now," Quinton said. "Both of you. We are a family." They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who came through Raton. It was a simple ceremony in the small church, with Doc Morrison and a few townspeople Quinton knew as witnesses. Laura wore a simple blue dress that had been her mother's, and Lily stood up with her as maid of honor. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Quinton felt like the luckiest man alive. They moved Laura and Lily's few possessions to Quinton's cabin the next day. It was strange at first, learning to share space, to navigate the rhythms of daily life together. But it was also wonderful. Quinton would come in from working the ranch to find Laura cooking supper, and his chest would swell with happiness. At night, they would lie in bed and talk about their dreams for the future, about the ranch they would build together, about the children they hoped to have. Lily recovered fully and proved to be a hard worker, helping with the cooking and cleaning and even learning to handle the chickens and milk cow. She was like a younger sister to Quinton now, teasing him good-naturedly and always ready with a smile. That first winter was hard but happy. The snow piled high and there were days when they could not leave the cabin at all. But they had each other, and that was enough. More than enough. Spring came and with it new beginnings. Laura discovered she was pregnant in April, and Quinton was so excited he rode all the way to Springer to tell Doc Morrison, who laughed and congratulated him. "That girl who knocked on your door begging for medicine turned out to be quite a blessing, did she not?" the doctor said. "The greatest blessing of my life," Quinton agreed. Their son was born in December, right as the first snow of the winter began to fall. They named him Henry, after Quinton's father. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes, and Quinton had never felt love like he did the first time he held that tiny, squalling baby. Laura was radiant, even exhausted from the birth. "We made this," she said in wonder, looking down at Henry. "You and me. We made this perfect little person." "You did most of the work," Quinton said, kissing her forehead. "You are amazing." Lily was completely smitten with her nephew, always eager to help care for him. She sang him songs and rocked him to sleep, and Henry clearly adored his aunt. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Quinton worked hard, building up his herd and improving the land. Laura proved to have a good head for business, helping him negotiate better prices for his cattle. They added on to the cabin, giving them more space as their family grew. Their daughter Rose was born 2 years after Henry, followed by another son, James, 2 years after that. The cabin was full of noise and laughter and life. Lily met a young rancher named Thomas at a church social when she was 21. He was a good man, hardworking and kind, and he courted her properly for 6 months before asking for her hand. Quinton gave her away at the wedding, feeling emotional as he walked her down the aisle. "Thank you for everything," Lily whispered to him before the ceremony. "For saving me, for giving me a home, for being the brother I never had." "You are family," Quinton said simply. "Always will be." Thomas had a small ranch about 5 miles away, so Lily was still close enough to visit often. She and Laura remained best friends, their children growing up together like cousins. On their 10th anniversary, Quinton and Laura sat on the porch of their now expanded cabin, watching the sunset. Their 3 children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. In the distance, they could see cattle grazing on land that was theirs, hard-earned and paid for. "Do you ever think about that night?" Laura asked, her hand in his. "When I knocked on your door in the storm." "I think about it all the time," Quinton said. "How different my life would be if you had not come, how empty. I was so scared that night. I thought Lily was going to die, thought we were going to lose everything. And then you opened your door and I saw something in your eyes, not just kindness but strength. I knew you would help us. I just did not know you would end up being everything." "You were everything from that first moment," Quinton said. "I just did not know it yet. When I rode to Springer that night, I thought I was just helping someone in need. I did not know I was riding toward my entire future." Laura leaned her head on his shoulder. 20 miles in a storm. I still cannot believe you did that. I would ride 100 miles, 1,000 if it meant finding you at the end." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from orange to pink to purple. Henry called out that he had found a frog, and Rose shrieked with delight. James totted after his older siblings, determined not to be left out. "We have a good life," Laura said softly. "The best life," Quinton agreed. 15 years after that fateful night, Quinton stood in the same spot on the porch. Though now the cabin had been expanded again, and a proper barn stood where the old ramshackle structure had been. The ranch had grown to be one of the most successful in the area, with hired hands to help with the work and a reputation for quality cattle. Henry was 15 now, already tall and strong, helping manage the ranch alongside his father. Rose was 13, with her mother's fierce determination and a talent for training horses. James was 11, always getting into mischief but with a heart of gold. Laura came out to join Quinton, her hair now showing threads of silver but her eyes just as bright as they had been that stormy night. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am, how blessed." She smiled, linking her arm through his. "We were both lucky, two desperate people who found each other in the middle of a storm. You know what Doc Morrison said to me a few months after we got married?" "What?" "He said that I went to get a doctor and came back with a wife. Said it was the best trade anyone ever made." Laura laughed. He was not wrong. Their youngest child, a daughter named Grace who was only 3 years old, came running out of the house. She had been a surprise, born when Laura was 37 and they thought they were done having children. She was the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by everyone. "Papa, Mama, come see what I drew." Quinton scooped her up, making her giggle. "Let us see this masterpiece." That evening, the whole family gathered around the dinner table. Henry talked about the new foals that had been born. Rose described the dress she was sewing for the upcoming harvest dance. James recounted a tall tale about a fish he claimed to have caught that was as big as a horse. Grace showed everyone her drawing, which was supposed to be the family, but looked more like stick figures with wild hair. Lily and Thomas came by with their 4 children, making the cabin burst at the seams with noise and laughter. The adults talked while the children played, and Quinton looked around at all these people. This family that had grown from one desperate knock on a door in the middle of a storm. After everyone had left and the children were in bed, Quinton and Laura sat by the fire like they had so many times before. "I never thanked you properly," Laura said. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me, on us. You did not have to ride into that storm. You did not have to help 2 strange women you had never met. You did not have to fall in love with me or propose or build this life with me. But you did. You chose all of it." "It was the easiest choice I ever made," Quinton said, pulling her close. "From the moment I saw you, something in me knew. This is her. This is the one. Everything else just followed from that." "I knew too," Laura confessed. "Even terrified and desperate, even thinking Lily might die, there was this moment when you looked at me and said you would help, and I felt it. This man is going to change my life. Changed it for the better, I hope. Better does not even begin to cover it." As they sat there in the firelight, Quinton thought back to the man he had been before Laura knocked on his door. Lonely, isolated, working his land alone and expecting to do so for the rest of his life. He had been content, or so he thought, but he had not been happy. Not really. Now, 15 years later, he had everything he had never known he wanted. A wife he loved more with each passing year. Children who filled his life with joy and purpose. extended family in Lily and Thomas and their children, a successful ranch that provided well for everyone, respect in the community and friends who valued him, all because he had chosen to ride 20 miles in a storm to get help for a stranger. No, not a stranger. Even that first night, Laura had been something more. Destiny, perhaps, or fate, or just the universe putting the right person in the right place at the right time. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as they always did. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle prices that fluctuated and hands that moved on. Henry eventually married a lovely girl from Springer and started his own ranch nearby. Rose married a lawyer from Santa Fe and moved there, though she visited often. James decided he wanted to be a doctor and went east to medical school, inspired by the stories of Doc Morrison, who had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. Grace, their youngest, showed a talent for music and could play the piano beautifully by the time she was 12. They bought her a second-hand piano from a family moving back east, and the cabin was often filled with the sound of her playing. Quinton and Laura grew older together, their hair graying, their faces lining, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened with time, growing richer and more complex as they navigated the joys and sorrows of life together. On their 25th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. Henry had 3 children of his own now. Rose had 2. Even James, who had finished medical school and set up practice in Raton, had recently married and had a baby on the way. The party was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and enough food to feed half the county. Friends and neighbors came to celebrate with them, and there was music and dancing and laughter. At one point, Quinton found himself standing with Lily, watching as Laura danced with one of her grandchildren. "You remember that night?" Lily asked. "When Laura went out into the storm to find help for me." "Every detail," Quinton said. "I was so sick, I barely remember any of it. But Laura told me later how terrified she was, how she had tried everywhere else and you were her last hope. She said when you opened the door and she saw your face, she knew everything was going to be okay." "I was terrified too," Quinton admitted. "That ride to Springer was the longest of my life. I kept thinking, what if I am too late? What if the doctor will not come? What if I fail these women who are depending on me? But you did not fail. You saved my life, and in doing so, you found the love of your own life. It is a beautiful story." "It is a beautiful life," Quinton corrected. As the sun set on that anniversary celebration, Quinton stood to make a toast. The crowd quieted, all eyes turning to him. 25 years ago," he began, "a woman knocked on my door in the middle of a storm, begging for medicine to save her sister. I did not have medicine, but I had a horse and the will to help. I rode 20 miles through the worst weather I had ever seen to bring back a doctor. And while I was riding, somewhere in those dark hours, I realized I was going to ask that woman to marry me. I had known her for maybe 2 hours total, but I knew." He looked at Laura, who had tears in her eyes. "I went looking for a doctor and I came back with a ring too. Best decision I ever made. Laura, you have given me 25 years of happiness, 6 beautiful children, and a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Here is to 25 more years." Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. Laura came to him and they kissed, not caring that everyone was watching. Later, when the party had wound down and most people had gone home, Quinton and Laura took a walk around the ranch. The moon was full, lighting everything in silver. "I want to show you something," Quinton said, leading her to a spot on a hill overlooking the ranch. "What is it?" "This is where I want to build a house. A proper house, not just an expanded cabin." big enough for all the grandchildren when they visit, with a porch that wraps all the way around and a kitchen twice the size of what we have now. I have been saving, and I think we can do it." Laura looked at the spot, then out at the view. You could see for miles the land rolling away in gentle hills, their cattle grazing peacefully in the moonlight. "It is perfect," she said. "But Quinton, we do not need a bigger house. What we have is enough." "I know, but I want to give it to you anyway. You came to me with nothing, and you have given me everything. Let me give you this." They built the house over the next year, and it was everything Quinton had promised. Large and comfortable, with modern conveniences like indoor plumbing and a proper kitchen stove. The piano had a place of honor in the parlor, and there were enough bedrooms that every child and grandchild could stay when they visited. More years passed, and the ranch continued to thrive under Henry's management as Quinton slowly stepped back, content to offer advice, but let his son run things day to day. He and Laura spent more time with their grandchildren, telling stories and passing down family history. Grace showed an interest in teaching and went to normal school, coming back to Raton to teach at the schoolhouse. She met a young rancher named William who was steady and kind, and they married when she was 20. Quinton and Laura became the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family, respected elders whose love story was famous throughout the territory. People would point them out in town, the couple who had found each other in a storm and built a legacy together. On their 40th anniversary, they decided to take a trip back to Missouri to see the places where they had grown up. It was Laura's first time back since she and Lily had left, and it was bittersweet to see how much had changed. They visited the graves of Laura's parents, and Quinton stood back while she talked to them, telling them about her life, about how things had turned out better than anyone could have hoped. "I wish they could have known you," Laura said later as they sat in a hotel room in St. Louis. "They would have loved you. I wish I could have known them too. They raised an incredible daughter." They returned to New Mexico content, knowing that their home was there now, not in the past but in the life they had built together. Quinton was 66 and Laura 62, when Lily passed away unexpectedly from a heart problem. It was a blow to both of them, losing the woman who had inadvertently brought them together. They mourned her deeply, but also celebrated the life she had lived and the family she had built with Thomas. "She was happy," Laura said as they stood at Lily's grave. "She had a good life, a full life. That night when she was so sick, when I thought I was going to lose her, I could never have imagined she would have 40 more years. Years of love and laughter and children and grandchildren. You gave that to her, to us. We gave it to each other," Quinton said, holding her close. They lived to see all their children settled and happy, to see grandchildren grow and have children of their own. The ranch passed to Henry and then to his son, each generation building on what came before. Quinton was 73 when his health began to fail. His heart had never been the same after a bout of pneumonia the previous winter, and he tired easily. But he did not complain, content to sit on the porch of the big house and watch the world go by. Laura was always with him, still as devoted as she had been that first night. She would read to him, or they would sit in comfortable silence, hands clasped, needing no words after nearly 50 years together. "You have any regrets?" she asked him one evening. "Not a single one," he said honestly. "I have had a life filled with love and purpose. I have a legacy in my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I have been blessed beyond measure. The only thing I regret is that I will not have more time with you. We have had 50 years, 50 incredible years. I would take 100 more if I could." Quinton passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cool October night, with Laura beside him. The whole family gathered for the funeral, and the church was packed with people whose lives he had touched. Laura lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She never stopped wearing Quinton's mother's ring, turning it absently on her finger whenever she thought of him, which was often. Every evening she would sit on the porch they had shared for so many years and watch the sunset, and it was easy to imagine him there beside her. When she finally passed, quiet and peaceful in her sleep at the age of 77, she was buried beside Quinton under a pair of oak trees they had planted when they first built the big house. Their legacy lived on in the ranch that was still in family hands, in the dozens of descendants who carried their names and their values forward, in the story that was passed down from generation to generation about the woman who knocked on a door begging for medicine, and the man who rode 20 miles through a storm and returned with a doctor and a ring. It was a story about desperation and courage, about kindness and love, about two people who found each other when they needed it most and built a life that lasted long beyond their years. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that sometimes the most important moments in life come disguised as emergencies, that sometimes the best things happen when we choose to help someone in need, that sometimes love arrives on your doorstep in the middle of a storm and changes everything forever. And in the big house on the hill, where great-great-grandchildren now played in rooms that echoed with generations of love and laughter, there was a framed photograph on the mantel. It showed a stern-looking man with kind eyes and a woman with a gentle smile, taken on their 50th anniversary. Beneath it was a small brass plaque that read simply, "Quinton and Laura Zeller, married 1883, a love born in a storm that lasted a lifetime." The ring, that simple gold band with the garnet stone that had belonged to Quinton's mother, was passed down through the generations, each new bride in the family wearing it on her wedding day in honor of the couple whose love had started it all. And each time it was worn, the story was told again, of the knock on the door, the desperate ride through the storm, and the proposal that changed two lives forever. Because that is what true love does. It transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, turns a simple act of kindness into a lifetime of devotion, and creates legacies that outlive the people who started them. Quinton and Laura had found that kind of love, fought for it, nurtured it, and watched it grow into something that would echo through the ages. Their story became legend in that part of New Mexico, the kind of tale mothers told daughters about what to look for in a partner, what fathers told sons about what it meant to be a good man. It was a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple decision to help someone in need. The ranch still stood, passed down through 6 generations now, each one honoring the foundation that Quinton and Laura had laid. The big house was full of life still, with the current generation of children running through rooms where their ancestors had lived and loved. And on stormy nights, when rain lashed the windows and thunder shook the walls, someone would always tell the story of that first storm, the one that had brought Laura to Quinton's door and started everything. It was a good story. But more than that, it was a true story, a real love that had existed and thrived and created something beautiful that lasted long after the people themselves were gone. And that, perhaps, was the greatest legacy of all. Not just that they had loved, but that their love had mattered, had made a difference, had rippled outward to touch countless lives across the generations. Quinton Xavier had opened his door to a desperate woman on a stormy night, had ridden 20 miles through hell to get help, and had returned not just with a doctor, but with a ring and a question that would change both their lives. Laura Zeller had knocked on that door as a frightened young woman alone in the world, and had found not just medicine for her sister but a home, a partner, a love that would sustain her through all the years to come. Together, they had built something that lasted. Together, they had created a legacy of love. And that legacy lived on in the ranch, in the family, in the story that would be told for generations to come. A testament to the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the incredible things that can happen when two people find each other against all odds and choose every day to build a life together. The end.